So I'm super happy to be here this morning. I realize that it's an international audience, so it's good morning, good afternoon, good midday, good middle of the night, or whatever. And I appreciate you all being here today with me. I'm really excited to talk to you about personal digital assistants. I always like to start my talks with a thank you. I'm up here talking, but I have worked with so many people through the years, my professors, my colleagues. I hope all of you realize how many people have contributed to you being in this room as well. So I like to start with that, and you'll see some of these faces throughout the talk. And then I thought I would give you a sense of where I've come from. This will help contextualize some of the things I'm going to tell you today. So I went to a small liberal arts college. I don't know if anyone else did that in the US. It's only about 2,000 people. Really fun. I got my PhD in computer science from the University of Washington. And then I spent a bunch of time working at Microsoft Research. So Microsoft Research is sort of, well, it's not sort of, it's 800 PhDs. So it feels a little bit like a computer science department, but one of the biggest ones you can imagine. It's an amazing place to be. You want to learn about anything, you walk down the hall and ask someone who's been doing research in that area. So my area is human-computer interaction, or how people work with technology, and also ubiquitous computing, which you can think about sensing systems and how systems disappear into our world. I was obsessed with technologies for homes and families. So I essentially built a bunch of sensing systems, put them in homes, including my own, and saw how it went. And you'll see sometimes it didn't go as we expected. I realized when I put this timeline together, it was just to give you a sampling, but it looks like I did nothing from 2007 to 2010. Rest assured, if you go to my webpage, there's plenty of projects there. But I started with an obsession with digital family. This is an inkable family calendar we put in people's homes in 2007. If you can cast, some of you are maybe too young to think back to 2007, but those of you who can, wireless was not as ubiquitous as it is now. In fact, when one of the homes, when we put this in, I said, oh, what's your wireless password? And they said, we'll have to call the neighbor. And I said, oh, OK. So Friday night, I'm on the phone with the neighbor trying to convince them that it's actually OK if they give me the wireless password so we can put this system into these people's houses. In 2010, had a great intern who I worked with again, you'll see. And we thought about how might children play together over the internet, right? You might have a cousin who's remote from you. Really fun. We looked at different projection technologies. My husband comes home and says, oh, CNN Tech picked that up when you guys presented your paper. And by the way, there's an instant poll, and 50% of the respondents think this is the worst idea ever. And I thought, well, at least people are actually responding to us, right? So in research, you're not always, you're breaking new ground. We're going to talk a lot about that middle picture in 2011. We put far-field speech-enabled PCs into people's homes. And then I got obsessed with smart things and home automation. And the last is a video of an emotional couch, which will be your fun teaser at the end. It's sensing systems embedded in furniture. So in 2015, I had an opportunity. I had been working on an incubation project, and it was acquired within Microsoft by the Windows team. And they said, would you like to come and work on it for real? And I thought, well, that's really interesting. So from about 2015, 2016 to now, I've been working on Cortana in a Microsoft product, doing far-field Cortana, the big one, some UX for our Harman Kardon device. Right now, my team leads assistant user relationship, which just means we think about how you and the digital assistant work together. In particular, I work with Amazon because Alexa and Cortana actually talk to each other, and we'll talk about that more, and on the natural speech interaction. So that is the context of me. And now we'll talk about personal digital assistant. And I love thinking about the language that people use. So when I was looking at this, these are all the different terms that you can see when people talk about personal digital assistants. And in fact, if we unpack it, digital, super straightforward, right? Characterized by electronic and especially computerized technology. That's not the most interesting part to me, to be honest. It's really the assistant part. This is kind of vague, right? A person who assists someone. So if you dig in, it's really the assist part. It's the act or the action that helps someone. And that is what gets me excited about working in this area, combined with the personal piece. It's private. It's used for one person, right? It's going to be different for me than for Lars or for you. But you're going to get a little historical perspective in this talk as well. I then realized, of course, in our industry, we've actually been trying to help people for a very long time, right, in different forms. And personal digital assistant, or PDA, meant something completely different in 1993. So I'm curious if anyone in this room had an Apple Newton. Anyone? Yay, at least one person. Palm Pilot? Yeah? OK, I joined you at the handspring visor. So I had one of those. Anyone else? No? And I bet everyone in this room would raise their hand if I asked if you had a smartphone, right? Yes? OK. If you don't, you know, talk to my children, who I didn't let have smartphones until they were 12, and they were, you know, pariahs in the neighborhood or whatever. But so you can see over the years, we've definitely progressed here. And of course, there are many home ambient devices now as well. If you'd like to waste an hour or two, or maybe more, as I did, the Buxton Collection is an amazing website. Bill Buxton is a luminary of human-computer interaction. He's been collecting devices through his whole life. And they're up on the web with lots of great explainers. So it was actually, I had a really fun time looking through that website again and reflecting on all the things that have come before us. So I'm going to take you briefly on a research journey. We're going to stay back in time. And this is really going to set the context for how I think about personal digital assistants and some of the opportunities. So come back with me to 2011. I don't want to know the age of some of you, but 2011, the Kinect sensor had just been released. People familiar with the Kinect? It was an attachment for Xbox, primarily focused on depth sensing. You could do awesome, volleyball, driving. We did dancing in the comfort of your own home where no one could watch you. You could do dancing. But what it also had was an amazing array microphone. And so when I looked at that, I thought, that is so cool. Hey, I do a lot of work in homes. Speech in the home is really interesting. Maybe this is finally a tool, a technology, that we could use in homes to enable far-field speech interaction. Now, I'm going to give away a little bit of the punchline with the spoiler here. It did not go as I hoped in 2011, but we learned so much from doing this. Now, before we go into the whole study, I wanted to pop up a level as a good human-computer interaction researcher and talk to you about user-centered design, which I'm hoping some people are already doing, but if you're not, I want you to think about. And so this is a notion where you put the user kind of in the center. You start by learning their current needs, thinking about what behaviors they're doing now. I then build something, technology, prototype, whatever we need to build to sort of get into their space, and then study if it works. And when I reflect back on all those years in MSR, you can look at every project and kind of see this cycle. All right, so here's the cycle for that study I mentioned in 2011. So this we called the Speech at Home Exploratory Study. There's a paper about it if you want to read more, but I'm going to give you the highlights. Done with my colleagues Corey, Brian, and Paul. And the core question was, how do people want to use speech to interact with technology in the home? Now, we probably should have said, do people even want to do this? But so we started with an assumption there, as you can see. And what we did was we built this awesomely named speech command computer. These were all-in-one PCs. We put that Kinect array mic on them. And then we set them up so that it was always listening for this phrase, speech command, just rolls off the tongue, right? The good news was we didn't think anyone was wandering around their kitchen saying speech command. And we picked something pretty long at that point so that we wouldn't get false positive triggers. Now, what happened was you said speech command. The PC would beep, and it would start recording for 15 seconds. So it didn't actually do anything, but we call this a diary study. So I want it in your home. So when you think, oh, I'd like to know what the weather is, you would say speech command, beep. What's the weather? And then I would later get that data, and our team would start to learn, oh, this is what people are looking for in public spaces in their home. This is what they want to know. Now, I know you're all sitting in 2019, and you all have one of these devices probably in your kitchen and all those things. But so come stay with me back in a world where we didn't have those devices yet. So we put these in 6 homes. I love these pictures because when you see glossy, future marketing things, the houses look perfect, but these look real to me. Like these are the actual houses, right? They're a little bit messy. They have a bunch of family stuff around. So this was the study. First, we did an initial interview. What's fun about that is, so we sat with the families and we said, well, what do you think you might say to this thing? And they'll say, oh, I think I'm going to ask about the weather. I think I'm going to ask about traffic. It's pretty general. It's the domain, really. And then for 2 weeks, that diary study happened. They basically interacted with the computer, and they said things. And what's fun about this is people said weather, and then they're like, what's the temperature tomorrow? Or is it raining right now? You get the actual gory detail when you do it this way. So they had that in their home for 2 weeks. And then we went back for a wrap-up interview with the members of the family. How did that go? Did you like it? Did you hate it? What did you find yourself saying? OK, so what happened? Well, not surprising to you, probably given your own use, the popular domains were web answers, traffic questions, calendaring, email, maybe even a little more productivity than we see today in common use. But we had, as I've sort of hinted, absolutely terrible recognition issues. And the funny part, well, I guess it's funny now, it was not funny then, is we of course piloted this in our own homes. And so I had this in my house, we were using it, it was going pretty well. It turns out I have a very quiet home, I don't leave the TV on, I don't have the radio on, all of these things were sort of perfect. And so once we got it into more real homes, we saw all of those recognition issues. So if you can look down to the fourth line where you see valid speech diary entries, that sort of tells the evil story, the sad story. You can see 36% of them were valid from household A, tragic 4% from household B, and it goes on. And so what was happening, right, they made these recordings, and then later we were transcribing them and trying to see what happens. And so I'm sitting there going, I can't hear it. What happened? Oh, this was just a mistake. And that was a big realization to us about the challenges of speech recognition in a normal home. The ESM part, you can read about it in the paper, but that's experience sampling methodology. So here we were popping up big pictures like a car or weather and seeing and asking, prompting people to interact with it. And this was because we were curious, does everyone ask for weather in the same way? What kind of phrasing do you use? And this was, again, one of those early studies where we were trying to understand that. But we did learn some things. So one thing that you'll see carries through in my research, we saw this desire for social presence. Now remember, it did nothing, right? You said speech command, it beeped, and it started recording. But even in my own home, I saw my children running down every morning to say hello to this thing, right? Literally, speech command, hi, and it beeped, and they felt great. And the kids were 10 and 8 at the time, right? But 11% of the diary entries were really treating the kiosk, the speech command computer, as something that has social presence. Hello, goodbye, please, you, all of those things. And 4 households wanted to name it. In fact, in one of the final interviews, a father said to me, well, it's kind of between a dog and a family member. So I'd really like to give it a personalized name like Sarah. And I can still remember sitting there going, that is such an interesting observation. I would not have thought of that going into this, right? And in fact, the media equation and other research of this ilk really dives into this. So I had the privilege of seeing Dr. Nass speak when I was in graduate school. And so in the media equation, it's basically the realization that we're just programmed in a way to treat technology, TV, everything as social actors. And so what Dr. Nass said in this talk was, you know, I take all psychology findings that are between 2 people, studies of that, I swap out one person for a computer, and I see if it still holds. And it usually does. And I remember thinking that's amazing. One, what a great research, way to do your research. You have this huge, set of literature and that you can refer to. But 2, how surprising. I mean, this even went to, if you use a computer to interact with it and then you take a survey about the experience on that computer, you rate it more highly than if you take that survey on a different computer, which is sort of, as we interact with people, we like them more, right? So you're liking your computer more, even if it's the identical computer. Blows my mind. Really interesting. The second thing we saw was just a complete change in how people interacted with the PC. So the nice thing about your voice is it reaches further than your hands, right? I can think of something across the room. What's the weather? What's a good restaurant near that place? I need to add something to my to-do list, any of those things. I can say it, And then I can walk over. And so like the example of, hey, what's a good restaurant near the Space Needle? I thought of it, I said it, the PC should like bring it up and I can walk over and start doing it. And so to me, it already feels like a faster experience because during the time I'm walking to the PC, we're actually bringing up the information. And so people just completely changed how they thought about what they would do with these PCs. So it becomes a quick, hands-free, glanceable interaction. Okay. But for me, I realized, man, this is just too early to ship for real. And I am not skilled in the art of deep speech recognition research, so it's probably time for me to hand this off to my awesome colleagues who are going to improve that space and step away and work on something else. So I actually moved to working on smart homes for a while, but I didn't actually forget this. So in 2016, we shipped Cortana on the lock screen for the Windows anniversary update, and it's a big, beautiful UX designed to be used at a distance. And what we see is as the PC hardware continues to improve, interactions like this with these and other devices that have screens from a variety of companies become really interesting and compelling. All right, we're just about to leave the research world, but I wanted to take a brief moment and say, as you know, I moved from research to product, and I thought it would be maybe completely different, like everything would change. And what I found is, no, it's actually pretty much the same, but I've taken my process and I've added 2 more steps. So I still learn, build, study, then we ship, and then we monitor, and then we learn again from the way that people are using our technology. So that's been actually really delightful for me. So let's come to now, to 2019. It's actually really different now for so many reasons. We were brainstorming about this when I was preparing for the talk, and you can think, wireless. We were just sitting in here and everyone's asking me, what's the wireless password? Like, there's just an assumption, right, of connectivity. When you think of the cloud and the amount of computing you can do in the cloud, it's amazing. When you think of those smartphones, we're carrying around these incredibly performant computing devices in our pockets, right? You might be wearing one on your wrist. And so from 2011 to 2019, much has changed. And in fact, if you haven't realized it, I'm guessing many of you have, we're actually living through an interaction inflection point. It is completely normal to think that we can talk to things. And I always like to look at kids, and if you think about children, there's a whole set of children growing up that just expect that you can talk to things, right? And you can take the researcher into product, but you can't really take her out of research. So in fact, a year or 2 ago, I worked with a former intern, and we looked at how children ask questions to these devices. So this was a really fun study. It was done at the Minnesota State Fair, and that kids are just going through. So more than 80 kids tried this. Again, this one's Wizard of Oz. So we had 3 sort of, you can see them, the green, red, and blue devices. They were each of a different kind. One was sort of like speech command. It was the voice computer. One was personified, so it referred to itself as a person. And one was personalized and used the child's name. And we looked at how the kids interacted across these for 2 real questions. One, how do children formulate question and answer tasks, and how do they reformulate to compare that with adults? And 2, do they have a preference between the sort of very standard, voice computing thing versus the personified or the personalized? You can read the paper if you're interested in this, but the take of that is that children preferred the personalized, so they liked it when it felt like they were interacting with another person. And you probably also realize that you've lived through maybe 2 inflection points. I was in a cab recently, and I went to pay, and I was tapping on the screen, and I had to catch myself. It wasn't a touch screen, and I thought, wow, I have completely made it over to that assumption that every screen you can touch, right? And certainly many of us in this room can remember when that was definitely not true. So it's a very exciting time right now. We don't know how long this takes and when every screen will be a touch screen, but you are watching a very big change in interaction now. So coming back to personal digital assistants, how many of you are using Siri, Cortana, Google, Bixby, anything? Yep, remember, this is the interactive part. Yeah, it feels good, get your blood flowing. On your phones? Yeah? On a PC? maybe fewer, but still some. On an ambient device, yeah. Really? Are we being shy, or is like that really true? Like, I'm doing research at this moment now. Ambient devices? No? In your home, so Echo device, Alexa, all of that stuff. Oh, so interesting. Okay, really? Really? Okay. All right. How about more than one? So you might use something on your phone, something in your home. 2? So this one always surprised me. So as I said, I'm working in multi-assistant right now. And initially I thought, well, everyone just uses one assistant, right? And then we started talking to people. And because assistants are so tied to the actual form factor right now, some people said, oh, I use Google on my phone, but then I have, you know, a whatever Apple device in my home, or this or that. And it was really quite interesting. All right, well, I'm going to pause here and just say right now, this is time of endless possibility, in fact. We've been talking about all the different form factors. We've been talking about different input modalities. And then we haven't touched on it yet, but I'll do so now. There's both reactive and proactive. So part of this slide is me trying to remind you that sometimes we get very narrow in thinking, oh, a personal digital assistant, well, now it's a device in my home, or now it's on my phone, or what have you. They're actually across form factors. They're across speaking. So I've done the cardinal sin of mostly talking to you about speech. But if you think about interacting with natural language, it can also be typed, touch. We see people using vision to know when I'm attending to something. And then reactive and proactive. So many times we think, oh, I ask the device questions, or I type it a question and it reacts to me, right? What's the weather? That sort of thing. But there's a lot of potential in proactive, by which I mean the device sees, or the assistant sees what I'm doing. So a good example might be when I get a travel email, right? Immediately, Outlook can figure out, oh, this is a travel email, and put it on my calendar, or offer to put it on my calendar. And there's a lot of potential in these offline tasks offering to help me. So I'm going to do sort of 101. I draw a version of this picture for everyone who starts in our group. I just want to make sure we're level set. I recognize there's lots of expertise in the room. But what's happening behind the scenes with most of these assistants, or these assistants, is there's some kind of trigger. That trigger might be spoken. It might be typed. It might be some kind of signal. I have the cool lightning bolt to honor all the work that my speech research friends are doing to translate speech into text, which is non-trivial, as we know. And the next step is understanding, or sometimes we call this language understanding. And that's the notion you're going to go from that string of text, what's the weather in Seattle, to a domain, weather, and an intent, okay? I need to look up the weather, and also we have slots in our case, right? Seattle, the city. So at this step, we've translated from what I spoke or typed into my intent. And then you can use APIs to look up an act, right? You can call the weather API with the Seattle and find that out. What's missing from this diagram that I also draw is the trip back to the user, particularly when that's spoken. So first we have to generate the response. You know, the weather in Seattle is cloudy right now, and there's so much that goes into how that's said, how long it takes, what's shown if there's a visual interface, but then also just generating the language, so the text to speech, and making that language sound natural, but also the voices sound as conversational as well if they're spoken out. Okay, I promised some breakthroughs, and next is opportunities. So if you haven't figured this out already, I am very appreciative of the breakthroughs in far-field speech recognition. This is across languages, this is across genders, this is across ages. Initially, children were really hard to understand. People have been working very hard on that. I love the way that this has led to access and inclusion, both for kids who may not know how to read or type yet, but also for people who may have trouble interacting with typed interfaces. And of course, our understanding has really just grown leaps and bounds in Q&A, in music, in games. I just got an email this morning about a podcast from MSR on our Lewis technology, which is the language understanding system. So there's just so much richness going on here. So now let's talk about the future, fun stuff, the stuff that makes me still get up and want to come to work every day and infuse my work with some research. So to do that, I'm going to step up to the vision of a digital assistant. I'm a I'm completely into science fiction, so I will admit that up front. And I know that many times our vision or the vision of the general population of what a digital assistant can do comes from what they've seen in the movies or read in books. Often this is a helper, so you can think of Jeeves from Iron Man and many other movies. Feel free to come and tell me your favorite example as we're over lunch or whatever. Teacher, I love The Diamond Age, which is a book by Neil Gaiman, where there's a book that walks along with a girl as she grows up and teaches her things. The last two, and those are both very much in the assist space, right? We're going to help you do things. The last two, Friend and Partner, there's been movies like Her and other things there. These are actually initially a surprise, but when I sit in my studies and people try things, I always ask them open-ended questions at the end. So what else would you want this to do? And I remember so distinctly a woman saying to me, well, I'm lonely, so I would like to just talk to this device, to interact with it, for it to be my friend. And I thought, that is really interesting. And we've seen Microsoft Research Asia has a chatbot called Xiaoice. Anyone familiar with Xiaoice? OK, cool. So Xiaoice is a chatbot. It is currently used by 600 million people, over 600 million people. And many of them chat with it more than 15 or 20 minutes per day about their lives, mostly teenagers and young adults. And this has been incredibly fascinating for the team in MSRA and for us to understand what the social support that people are getting from Xiaoice. So here are 5 opportunities that I'm going to tell you about: conversational, trustworthy, personalized, collaborative, and helpful. So in conversational, again, huge strides happened here, but so much more potential to interact with me more naturally. Most things right now are typed commands or one-shot, as we would call them, and so much potential to remember what we talked about yesterday, last week, to even reach out and confirm my preferences, right? If I'm interacting with you and we go out to lunch and I notice that you're always ordering cheese pizza, I might casually ask, oh, do you prefer vegetarian food? Because I'm thinking about where I'm going to book our next meeting. But I'm allowed to ask, right? And so you can imagine as we move forward, a digital assistant might say, hey, you're always having 8 a.m. meetings with your team in London, as I do. Is it OK if I'm thinking about your calendar to book meetings at that time, right? Which might seem like a little bit early for other people. Again, historical context, this is not new. I was rewatching this video by Chris Schmantz and Barry Aarons about the conversational desktop. And it is amazing the things they were thinking about in 1985. The furniture is from 1985, which is hilarious. But they were using vision and attention and all of these things. And so it's really interesting to see how long we've worked on similar problems and how, as we get new technology and opportunities, we can go back to these same questions. So the next one is trustworthy. Now, thank you, Lars, for the great interaction this morning and all of that. But it takes time, right, to earn someone's trust. I don't show up, meet you, hand you my credit card immediately, or even tell you my deepest fears or how I like to do my work. It takes time. I've put 2 resources here. I've been reading Brad Smith's book, Tools and Weapons. It feels a little awkward to talk about a book from Microsoft, coming from Microsoft, but what's fabulous about this book is he really looks at AI and all the challenges that it's bringing and has chapters on all sorts of different topics from face recognition. He mentions Xiaoice and other things. So if you're looking for a great overview book with even more behind the scenes of Microsoft and other companies, because there's been industry work together on this, that's great. And then on the right is very pragmatic. This is the guidelines that we use at Microsoft. They're published. It was a collaboration between MSR and the product teams. You may not be able to read it, but the third line is one that I've spent way more time on now, which is what to do when you're wrong. When you build a research system, you kind of sometimes don't figure out you're wrong till it's over. But when we build real systems, we spend a lot of time thinking about what to do when we haven't got it right. The bottom line is all about that trust over time. The third place, and I think this is a very ripe area of opportunity, is being mine. If you think about digital assistants right now, they're pretty similar whether I'm talking to them, my kids are talking to them, or typing to them, or interacting with them. But if you think about humans, we love to customize, right? Our avatars, our phone cases, our homes, our furniture. We're starting to see some hints here with people allowing different wake words, different voices, but I'm expecting this space to really explode. Now, all of those three were really about how the assistant-user relationship. They were about interactions. As I said, good relationships grow, we learn, we can observe, we can infer, we can confirm, and then we use that to inform. So those three opportunities are all about the interaction. The next two are going to be about what the assistant does, about its possible capabilities. So first, very near and dear to my heart, is collaborative, multi-assistant, giving me the best team. I think at the moment, you sometimes see everyone trying to be the be-all and end-all of assistants, but as we move forward, there will be probably more specialization, right? Particularly with Cortana, we've become very focused on helping you with productivity tasks, with your email, calendar, and at work. We can see others starting to specialize. And if you specialize, then you need a team, right? I need to be able to get from one to the other. I need people to refer me like, hey, that's a task that this other assistant might be even better at. And Amazon led this, but Microsoft and many other companies have joined this fall, this voice interoperability initiative, so that we can have multiple interoperable voice services. So last but not least is being more helpful. So this is doing what I can't. So it's great that you can use speech or natural language to cut through steps, to quickly get to something. I don't have to remember where a menu item is. But it's even better if the assistant can do something that might be hard for me. So Cortana suggested tasks. Cortana's monitoring my email, and if I promise something like I'll send you that slide deck, next day she'll say, hey, did you remember to send that slide deck? Which is amazing when you forgot because you don't want to look like an idiot. And this has saved me more times than I would like to admit. So those last two are about augmenting the human. I'm playing with this terminology of superhuman. It's not perfect, but really about giving me access to capabilities beyond mine with an assistant who has the ability and patience to see patterns that I can't and to check for things that I might not have time for, like how does my schedule look next week and things like that. So those were the 5 opportunities. Again, the first 3 were about the interaction. The second 2 are about the capabilities. And I think we're going to skip maybe the video for time. No? Let's see the video. OK, this is your fun thing. I will say we do lots of very serious research, but every once in a while we have an intern project where we want to push the bounds.
What if furniture was interactive, showing different colors and patterns depending on the situation? Furniture might even have its own emotions. For example, showing happiness when someone put flowers in front of it, or being angry when kids are fighting on it.
Those are my kids. When they were younger,
people react to the concept of interactive furniture and how they interpret emotions conveyed through lights, patterns, and vibrations embedded in furniture, we built a ModaCouch. A ModaCouch has custom cushions containing strips of individually controlled LEDs. We embedded a voice coil in a cushion and played subsonic audio files to make the cushion vibrate. We hand drew the patterns for the couch to facilitate rapid prototyping while experimenting with ways to dynamically show different patterns on fabric by changing the color of thermochromic pigments through heat emitted by thin nichrome wires. We conducted a mechanical Turk survey to learn what emotions people associate with different colors and patterns as well as their combinations, and how consistent people are in identifying 6 emotions: angry, happy, sad, calm, excited, and afraid. Next, in our lab study with 14 pairs of parents and children, we gathered richer qualitative data as participants interacted with the ModaCouch. Study participants suggested many different situations when their couch might express emotions, from excitement during a party to being happy when the family is together. The concept of interactive furniture intrigued most participants. However, opinions varied on whether the couch should automatically express emotions based on its surroundings or be set manually to a desired emotion.
So come to Microsoft Research for the summer, and you may end up in a couch video, as many of those actors were other interns. My younger son is now 6'4", so I love watching that picture of him being tiny. All right, thank you very much. I will take questions, and you can always check out my webpage for more information.
Thank you so much. Awesome.